Yeah. Hello, today we're speaking with Ben Keane from the United Kingdom. Ben is independent analyst and director of several companies and also an advisor. Hello, Ben.
Hello, Vera.
And today we are going to speak about OTT, unicast, DRM, CDN, and telecommunication industry and pay TV market. So, yes, Ben. My first question will be about fast channels. It seems that we are coming back to advertisement, which is totally horrible for me. What do you think about fast channels?
Well, for those who don't know, FAST stands for Free Ad-Supported Streaming Television. So really, it is just a reinvention of linear television, but delivered over the internet. Now, I think that it is something that has got a lot of industry interest at the moment because it has been very hyped and promoted by a number of companies in the industry. So I don't think it is a magic bullet solution to any of the challenges facing the industry. But, you know, it's certainly an interesting added opportunity for media companies.
If we talk a little bit about your clients, with which questions do they come to you? Because you are a very experienced advisor with decades of experience in the industry, in media industry, in telecommunication industry. And with what questions do people come to you and say, Ben, please help me?
Well, they vary dramatically. Very, very different kinds of questions. But, you know, the question or the topic area that you started with, you know, really you're asking about advertising.
Yeah.
That really is, you know, obviously a business model. It's a business model. It's one of the ways that media companies trying to generate revenues in this business. Now, you know, what we tend to see throughout this business is a cyclical pattern. Mm-hmm. So the pendulum swings from one side to another and the industry goes up and down. So we're seeing right now a swing towards advertising as a business model, or at least away from pure subscription as a business model. Now, what you asked me about the kind of questions that clients ask, well, one of the questions that clients ask is, what kind of business model should we pursue? Mm-hmm. What makes sense? Now, many of the companies, particularly in the streaming space, and those who are would-be streamers, they are thinking about what business model they should pursue. And my advice is generally for the smaller companies to think about a combination business model, what we call a hybrid approach, whereby advertising can be combined with paid for streaming and particularly subscription. Mm-hmm. So, you know, one of the beauties of having an advertising, or at least a free part of your option, is that you can generate more viewers overall because you've lowered the barriers to entry for them. That enables you to widen the funnel of viewers that you can get into your service. If you widen the funnel, that means as you drive more and more viewers into your experience, you can convert more and more of them into a paying customer. So the more viewers you have, the more viewers you start with, the better. And if you can generate both advertising from them and subscription from them, you're getting the best of both worlds.
Is there any magic proportions between, let's say, such percent is subscribers and this percent is advertising?
I don't think there's any magic proportion, no. It depends on what your proposition looks like in content terms, in terms of the audience you're targeting, and very much also where you are streaming this service, because there are dramatic differences between different territories and different markets. So the proposition you go with in one country, that may be entirely inappropriate to the way that you offer the service in another country. It depends, and it also depends on, as I said, the kind of content. What one particular content proposition may work as an advertising proposition, while other services, really would be very hard to run as a pure advertising service. So the proportions and the mix of business model really depend on what your overall proposition looks like.
Mm-hmm. And there is a new fashion or trend about going green. For example, green streaming. Do you believe in it, or how much is it achievable at all?
I think it's incredibly important. I think it's an issue that needs to be given more and more attention. There's an organization called Green Streaming, which is just I think had about its first year as an organization. I think that is an organization that deserves a lot of support. I would urge other companies to join that organization and really try and push that agenda along.
And there is a lot of competition, of course. Many paid TV platforms, free platforms, fast self-produced content, and due to this we have a huge customer churn. So nowadays paid TV platforms oftentimes lose their customers. How to prevent this customer churn?
Well, I think there are a whole number of elements to that. So, number one, having the right content. So when you have the right content for your audience base, for your customer base, whatever business model you're using, that is absolutely the first thing in order to make sure that you keep offering the content that your audience is most interested in. And then you've really also got to make sure that you are paying close attention to your customer base so that you understand them. And that means understanding everything about them, understanding their behavior. That comes then down to the kind of data that you have about them and how you use that data, how you use the analytics to respond to what your customers are doing and ensure that you are addressing their needs on a continuous basis so that you do keep your customers and avoid them churning off your platform. And if they do churn off, then you need to have very proactive strategies for winning them back again. So, there are a whole number of different strands that are possible to really reduce churn and ensure that your customers stay loyal.
And also, pay TV platforms have to make oftentimes a choice between different vendors. CDN vendors, DRM, transcoders, decoders, etc. But if, let's say, I'm a TV platform owner and I'm not a professional in CDN or DRM, how can I make choice between vendors?
Well, I think it comes down to doing effective due diligence. So really making sure that you ask the right questions. And, you know, if I were to just pick one thing that that I would urge strongly that people do when they think about making these kind of choices, when they think about running RFP processes, that's request for proposals, and so on. Talk to the customers of the vendors that you are considering.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to them, make sure you get honest feedback from them on the propositions you are being presented with. Never take what the vendors are telling you at face value alone. Get feedback. Mm-hmm. Get feedback, especially from those who are already using them. So get the good and the bad.
Yeah. Another trend is going more and more to OpEx model. And now it's becoming more and more popular. Something as a service, TV as a service, CDN as a service, DRM as a service, everything as a service. In general, why do we have this trend is growing and growing?
Well, I think in part it comes back to underlying business model issues and the way that operational business models work. And there is certainly a trend for companies to believe that reducing CapEx and moving expenses and costs to OpEx is an important way of being more efficient as an operating company. So in those circumstances, if you use something as a service, then you by definition are paying for it over time, not as a one-off CapEx type payment. So I think that explains a lot of the underlying attraction of those kinds of models. On the vendor side, those companies who are pursuing those strategies also have seen that those the companies that pursue, whether it's any of the as a service models that you're talking about, they can see that the market and investors in particular like that approach and like the valuations that are attached to as a service type business models as opposed to other CapEx heavy models.
But are you personally, as an advisor, agree that OpEx is an answer and key to everything?
I don't think any one thing is the answer and key to everything.
So what are the hidden threats of OpEx?
Well, I think it goes, one of the things I would want to stress is, and this relates to some of the underlying technology enablers as well here, because often these discussions around moving to SaaS or some other as a service proposition, they're related to a transition to cloud in some shape or form. But these decisions are not just about economics. They're not just about accountancy. I think as important are questions around flexibility. So I think to be truly competitive in today's world, the more flexible, nimble, and agile you can be, the better. So that gives you a very strong competitive position. So, I think those are the real underlying reasons, aside from any balance sheet issues you might have. Those are very good reasons for going down that strategic direction.
And in terms of being flexible, can clouds be a solution? Because clouds is one of another very huge trend in telecommunications. Everyone is going to clouds, but as well as companies are very much afraid of clouds because they lose control, and there is a huge dilemma. What do you think about clouds?
Well, I think that, yes, there is a fundamental trend towards shifting many processes onto the cloud, but each business case needs to be evaluated, on its own merits. I think, I'm not sure the issue of control is necessarily, the primary issue. I think that cloud does not necessarily mean any loss of control over a process. In some ways, it could mean you have more control because you can potentially, as I've just suggested, have more flexibility in what you do. So if you have more flexibility, then you are more in control of your destiny, about being able to make quicker decisions, respond to market environments, be able to throw up different services that weren't possible with, an on-premises solution where you'd already made a significant investment and were tied into a particular approach. So I don't think cloud, again, like any of these things, cloud is not a magic bullet solution to all ills. It has to be used for genuinely well thought out reasons, and that is a complex set of reasons, and it should be evaluated in those terms.
Yeah, and so you have more than 20 years of experience in digital media, and what was most intriguing or interesting if you look back to that 20 years? Maybe what was most interesting for you in all this story, in all this?
Well, I have been fortunate enough to see a lot of major transitions, major launches of different platforms, services over the years. I was present, for example, when Rupert Murdoch first announced Sky Television, and also when he announced the consolidation of satellite television in the UK, and seeing off the competition, which was another state backed satellite provider. But that in itself was a very disruptive kind of television when Murdoch launched Sky and offered direct-to-home satellite TV in the UK for the first time. That was a major shift. But I think if we move on, Netflix and the way that Netflix has created a direct-to-consumer streaming industry, and in the process reinvented what a studio can be. So what a Hollywood studio truly of the 21st century looks like, one that really makes maximum use of the technology that exists. I think, Netflix has been both incredibly disruptive, but also incredibly influential in terms of how it has caused a rethink and a reshaping of pretty much the entire industry that we work in. So, I just really, I think, pick those two examples just off the top of my head.
Yeah, and how do you think the industry will change in next 20 years? What will be our future in terms of media communications, digital?
Look, I think there's going to be shifts and changes that we can only, just begin to see little hints now as to what they may look like. I think one of the dimensions that we all experience these days is an acceleration of change. So, there used to be, there was a famous quote from Bill Gates where he said essentially that people overestimate change in a 2-year time frame, but underestimate change in 10 years. I think the experience of the global pandemic and how this industry experienced the global pandemic showed how, even a 2-year time frame can result in acceleration of change that exceeds, almost everyone's expectations. The kind of changes we've seen over the last few years have been very, very dramatic, in terms of acceleration of streaming, in terms of acceleration of remote production technologies, in terms of the changes we're seeing in terms of virtual production, for example, where all sorts of new possibilities are happening. So change is happening much faster. I think that those companies who are looking to exploit some of the exciting possibilities of Web3, for example, I think that there will be some very significant changes associated with those building block kinds of technologies. I mean, just to give you one small example, we were talking at the beginning of this conversation about FAST, and in essence about how that is a sort of internet reinvention of linear television, albeit combined with some perhaps more sophisticated ad tech solutions that go with it, but essentially that. Imagine if you combine that sort of proposition, but with some Web3 elements of blockchain-enabled technologies that allow you to incentivize viewing and reward viewers with Bitcoin type payments, for example, so that you can generate more viewing, which in turn generates more ad revenue, so it gives more cake overall in revenue terms to the media company, but as a virtuous circle feeds back into into the viewers' pockets and allows them to benefit in terms of digital currency. So, you know, there's an interesting company to watch there called Video Edge, and they have a platform called Watch to Earn, which is already developing this kind of business model. So that's one to look at for sure.
Is there something important that we didn't discuss, but which should be mentioned? Maybe we forgot something.
There are, you know, so many, you know, different different aspects to this fascinating, you know, business. You know, one of the issues and challenges that I often draw attention to, you know, is the this kind of excitement that has gripped the traditional industry, and really as a result of seeing the Netflix model and persuaded them all that they need to be a B2C company, business to consumer, direct to consumer, rather than a business to business company. Mm-hmm. So if you think about the traditional media economy and the way it would work, you know, those companies who create content and distribute content, they would traditionally be in the business of selling that content on a business to business basis to as many different buyers around the world as they could. So the same piece of content would be sold multiple times. The revenue, the value increased with the way that that content is windowed on different platforms, but they would sell it to, you know, at least one player in every territory they could, and maybe more than one territory more than one player in each territory. But if you throw that business model out of the window and say, I'm going to keep all my content, put it in my own service, run my own B2C direct to consumer service, and I'm going to therefore forego all the revenues I could have got by selling that content to all those other companies around the world, then that is a major shift. And I think it's a major shift that will, to some extent, start to be unpicked over the next few years. I think that, again, we'll see that pendulum I mentioned earlier begin to swing in a different direction. So that rush to go direct to consumer, I think, may have repercussions, and there may be a bit of a backlash at some point in the near future, just as there's been a bit of a reset as far as pure subscription models are concerned. So watch this space.
Well, thank you so much, Ben. It was incredibly interesting. And I wish you a lot of success, a lot of new clients, and interesting cases, of course. And good luck.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.